Yes, people. Now you will understand what the posing is all about. Do you even pose, bro? Do you even pose? Do you pose, bro? That JoJo's Bizarre Adventure Stardust Crusaders has finally been graced on us. We've been blessed with that Joseph Joestar, that Jotaro Kujo, and a final proper adaptation of this material. I'm just so hyped that, first of all, Crunchyroll got it, so that means we're going to have official subs, and it's seemingly going to be every Friday, so every Friday we're about to witness this greatness in this episode. Oh my god, first of all, bringing back one of the greatest villains. Yes, people, if you've never seen JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, one of the greatest villains of all time, and already introduced in the first episode, reintroduced, shall I say, Dio Brando. This episode, oh, yes. That's all I can say, yes. Oh, no. Yes, people. So this episode, definitely a couple things I want to address. First of all, the characterization that we got within this episode of Jotaro Kujo, the grandson to Joseph Joestar. First of all, like, talking about just the names in general. So it seems as though what they tried to accomplish at the end of part 2, and if you haven't seen any of this, I'll give you a quick backstory. Pretty much part 1 was Jonathan Joestar, part 2 was Joseph Joestar, his grandson, and part 3 is, so on and so forth. So it continues. In this episode, this was the grandson to Joseph. So you get the continuation of the Joestar. Unfortunately, Jotaro, he's not, like, he's a Joestar by blood and by body and whatnot, but he's not actually, he's Jotaro Kujo because his father, and, his father was not the actual son. So, the bloodline separated in a sense for the last name, but he's still a Joestar nonetheless. And the characterization we got with this one, it's interesting because you see there was a change in him, because you look in the past, and I don't know if that was just Holly, like, remembering in a different light of what the character was, because you see her thinking about him while she's running to the cell, and she's thinking of all the times of him, like, oh, mother, yes, oh, yeah, mother, and he seemed like a really nice kid, but then we see him in this prison, and he's like, get out of here, bitch, and I'm just like, the disrespectfulness, personally, I don't agree with it. I'd never treat my mother like that, but the motherfucker don't give a shit. He's like, I'm not leaving this prison until I get to the bottom of this. So you see, first of all, that he has this carefree, disrespectful nature to them. He tells his grandfather to fuck off. He tells the cops, like, yo, I'm not leaving, fuck off. He got the prisoners scared of him. So I'm curious if it will get explained, because me personally, I've seen some of the old OVAs of the Part 3 Stardust Crusaders. A lot of it was changed, and just overall it wasn't a proper adaptation of this material at all. So I don't even really count most of the stuff I saw as stuff that I'll be witnessing within this Part 3. So, and I don't remember a lot of it either. So I'm curious if we'll get an explanation as to why he's so disrespectful. Was it because now that he has this power, or what he seemed, he thought was possessing him in this episode, did that change his thoughts and he was just so freaked out, even though he was still talking to her like that when they were in the restaurant? So we got a little bit of the characterization with that guy. He's pretty much a carefree, disrespectful, silent, quiet, muscular type. Very muscular. This is definitely those old character designs that you got from like the early 90s, late 80s, early 90s, mid 90s. I don't remember when this was actually created or whatnot in the manga, because it's obviously an adaptation of the manga. So characterization of him, for the most part, that was pretty interesting. Joseph Joestar, I love how in this adaptation of him, he is more like Joseph Joestar than the OVAs, because in the OVAs, they completely changed his personality. He was, like, very quiet, and it was just, oh my god. With this one, you still get that character of him, like, being playful. He's there in the airport. Yeah, I come for my only daughter anywhere in the world. I don't care. I love you so much. And then at the same time, he still gets embarrassed because, he has his manliness. So, a lot of nice characterization within this episode, and introduction to the stands, because Part 1 and Part 2 didn't have this. Part 3, we get the introduction to the powers. It's no longer the Ripple. It's the stand now, and this is pretty much evil-looking spirit or whatever. And we've seen 2 different stands in this episode. 3 different stands, actually. We had Joseph's, which was pretty much like this plant that could take, like, weird images or whatever, and he kept on getting Dio. Then we also had Jotaro Kujo's, which was that brolic looking shit. And it's just interesting regarding the stands, because it seems as though it's a display of their power, of their inner energy, yet he doesn't have total control of it, because he was just hurting people without wanting to, and it's kind of like, holy fuck, what do you do? And then we also had Abdul's, which looked like some bird type of thing, which we got introduction to a lot of characters already in episode 1. If you haven't seen JoJo, there's even more characters they got introduced, because you never seen Dio Brando, you never seen Joseph Joestar. There's a lot of characters introduced within this episode, and I just like how there's a couple different parts of the episode that makes it like a little bit different, because you have the relationship between, mother and son, and relationship between father and daughter, grandfather and grandson, a lot of different scenarios, and I just love how it always plays back to the very beginning, so it kind of continues to wrap everything together from part 1 to part 2 to part 3. I will always say one thing, and I'll never understand it. If somebody wants to clarify it, is it simply just a plot hole that's just there? You know, Araki was just like, fuck it, YOLO, it happened with the whole thing with the coffin. Because if I'm correct, wasn't it the mother, I forget her name, but it was basically Jonathan's wife. Didn't her and the kid end up escaping via that coffin? So how would the coffin would have held him in there, you know, Dio Brando? And I always will wonder, like, how did he end up managing to get on the body, get on Jonathan's body, and get into a coffin, which there was only one coffin, if I'm correct, unless there was a second one, or unless he was hiding under her, and once she escaped, he, like, locked it up and went back in the water with it or something. I don't know. So that's always something that I wonder, is that just a simple plot hole, or what's up with that, which... pretty big plot hole, actually. Not a simple one, but it really doesn't deteriorate the fact that part 3 just comes off with a bang. You get introduced to the main villain. You got everything in this first episode. So they did an amazing job adapting this, and overall, it's just like, how can you not be hyped for JoJo's Bizarre Adventure Stardust Crusaders? If you've seen part 1 and 2, you damn sure better watch this. Don't cheat yourself out of the experience. And if you haven't, I recommend going back and watching part 1 and part 2. It's, what, 25, 26 episodes, something like that. But if you really just want to jump in here, I guess you can. There are references back to part 1 and part 2, but they do abandon certain aspects of part 1 and part 2. Like, they don't use the ripple anymore, which was the main power of part 1 and part 2. So, with this one, it's a whole different introduction. So, if you really want to get into this, you can watch, in a way, part 3, but I would strongly recommend against that, because you won't get a lot of the references. You won't get the history with Dio and Jonathan. You'll have to, like, sit there and get explained, and it's just overall a better experience to go back and revisit some of that material of part 1 and part 2, especially getting more of the characterization, so you can understand just why Joseph Joestar is the way he is and what led to all these events. So that's my whole take on that. And just as far as, like, episode 1 came off already strong as hell. You got him like, I'm not leaving the prison. Abdul's like, I'm gonna get you out of that motherfucking prison. And in the end, his power is so overwhelming, so it gives you already a gauge of how strong Jotaro is, and he doesn't even have a grasp of how to really use this power. He can't stop it from hurting other people, so he is strong as hell. This Abdul guy, which obviously Abdul, you can see he somewhat has a grasp of his power. He's pretty strong. He knows what he's doing for the most part. So for him to not know what he's doing, really, he doesn't even understand, can't grasp stand at that point, and he kind of fucked up Abdul, and Abdul pretty much couldn't do what he wanted to do, send him to the hospital. That shows how strong he is, and Dio Brando better watch out, because Jotaro Kujo's coming for you. Joseph Joestar's gonna avenge his grandson, and it's just gonna be hype. I can't motherfucking wait. Stardust Crusaders, my body is ready. What did you guys think of that episode? That was an amazing first episode. Great first episode. Maybe if I had to rate it, because this is more so a reaction to this, I'd give it like maybe like a 9 out of 10 or so. This was just a great first episode. Still looking at that glaring plot hole that will always make me wonder, just, was that a different coffin? Was he on the second level and it just happened to sink right after she got out of it, after she was rescued? What's up with that? But as a whole, just like, oh, I'm so glad we're getting this adaptation, a better one. Yes, we got it, people. JoJo Bizarre Adventure fans, we finally got a proper adaptation, and I can't wait. But that's all I have for this reaction. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed. Thumbs up for what? Stardust Crusaders, baby. Thumbs up for Dio Brando, Jotaro Kujo, Joseph Joestar. It's going to be a fun ride, and I can't wait. I'm ForneverWorld, and as always, people, have an awesome day.